Take a look at this. This is a fleet of Imperial warships, hundreds of them, and a single one could probably flatten a continent. Each ship is a masterpiece of engineering and just terrifying, destructive power. And it all belongs to this guy, John. So, what great act of conquest did he pull off? What grand strategy brought the galaxy to its knees? Well, he shared his lunch with a couple of strange kids for a few months. This is the story of how a simple act of kindness from a man who Hey John's life was built out of routine and loneliness. In a city of millions, he was pretty much an island of one. His apartment was a small gray box on the 14th floor of a much larger, even grayer box. The walls were totally bare, not because he was a minimalist, but because he just never felt like he had anything worth putting up. His job was just as anonymous. He was a data entry clerk for some mega corporation, a tiny cog in a machine so huge he couldn't even guess what it actually did. Every single day was a carbon copy of the one before. Wake up at 6 a.m., eat a single piece of toast, catch the 7:15 a.m. train, always finding a seat where he wouldn't have to make eye contact. Stare at spreadsheets for 8 hours until the numbers just blurred together. Take the 5:45 p.m. train home. Make a simple dinner for one, usually pasta or something from the microwave. Watch TV until his eyes got heavy and then go to sleep. He wasn't miserable, not really. It was more of a quiet, creeping emptiness. He was basically invisible. To his co-workers, he was just the quiet guy in the corner. To his neighbors, he was just a quick nod in the hallway. He hadn't had a real conversation in months, maybe even years. The silence in his apartment was his most constant companion. The only thing he ever looked forward to was his lunch break, and not even for the food. It was for the 10 minutes of fresh air he got on a bench in a small, forgotten park behind his office. It was the only punctuation in a life that was otherwise one long, run-on sentence. The almost nothing to give earned him an entire star fleet. Then one Tuesday, the routine broke. As he sat on his usual bench unwrapping a cheese and pickle sandwich, he saw them. 2 kids, a boy and a girl, standing near some bushes at the edge of the park. They were pale, with these huge dark eyes that just seemed to soak up the light. They wore simple gray tunics that were perfectly clean, which was weird in the middle of the grimy city. They weren't playing or talking. They just stood there watching him with this unnerving stillness. And they looked hungry. Not just a little peckish, but the kind of deep, hollow hunger you could feel from across the park. Now, John wasn't a man of action, but he couldn't just sit there. Without a second thought, he split his sandwich in 2. He walked over, knelt down, and held out the half on his open palm. "Here," he said softly. "You look like you need this more than I do." The kids didn't say a word. They just glanced at each other, having a whole silent conversation in a split second. Then the girl, who was a little taller, stepped forward and took the sandwich with these delicate, precise fingers. They shared it, eating with a strange tidiness. Every bite was clean and efficient. When they finished, they just looked at him, their dark eyes giving nothing away. Then, as quietly as they'd arrived, they turned and walked back into the bushes and were just gone. John stood there for a second, a strange feeling in his chest. It wasn't until he was back at his desk that he realized it was the first time in a very long time that anyone had really seen him. The next day, they were there again, and the day after that. This became their new routine. John started packing a bigger lunch, 2 sandwiches, an apple, a bag of chips. Every day at 12:15 p.m., he'd sit on his bench, and they would just appear. He'd offer the food, and they'd accept with that same silent grace. This went on for 3 months. He started to learn their faces, the way the boy's hair fell over his forehead, the way the girl's eyes would track a bird flying by. He also started noticing some oddities. Their clothes were never dirty even when it rained. The fabric just seemed to repel grime. He never heard them speak, not once, yet they communicated perfectly with each other. One day, he accidentally brushed the boy's hand while giving him a juice box, and his skin felt impossibly smooth like polished stone, and cool to the touch even though it was the middle of summer. John didn't question it. Their silent company was like a medicine for his loneliness. They were the only ones who seemed to expect him, to wait for him. Their daily meeting became the new bright spot in his gray world. He was no longer just John the data clerk. He was the man who fed the strange, silent kids in the park. But he was about to find out they weren't ordinary kids at all, and his simple kindness had been noticed by powers beyond his wildest dreams. One Thursday, as he was packing up to leave work, the sky went dark. Not storm dark, but a sudden, total eclipse, like a giant hand had just snuffed out the sun. An absolute silence fell over the city. Car alarms died. Traffic vanished. John and millions of others looked up. Coming down from the clouds was a ship, so massive it felt like it was breaking the laws of physics. It was a silent black teardrop that blotted out the sky. There was no roar of engines. It just hung there, and its presence alone was a deafening quiet. A single beam of soft white light shot down, landing in the exact spot in the park where John shared his lunch. Panic didn't happen. Instead, there was just this universal, paralyzing awe. A figure emerged from the light. She was tall, maybe 9 feet, and wore iridescent armor that shimmered from deep violet to liquid gold. Her face was humanoid but impossibly elegant, with skin like moonlight and eyes that looked like a star field. 2 small, polished horns curved from her temples. She didn't walk. She glided. And right behind her, floating obediently, were the 2 children from the park, now wearing the same regal outfits. The being glided to a stop right in front of John's office building. A voice then echoed, not through the air, but directly inside everyone's mind. It was a voice of incredible power, but also had a warmth that just didn't match her intimidating look. "I am Empress Xylar of the Galactic Dominion," the voice announced. "I have come for the one you call John." John's heart hammered against his ribs. All around him, co-workers and security guards scrambled away from him like he was poison. Compelled by a force he couldn't fight, he slowly made his way outside and stood before the Empress, a small, trembling man in a rumpled suit. The Empress tilted her head. "John," the voice in his head said, softer now, "for 3 of your months, my children have been undergoing a trial of observation. It is an ancient custom. We send them to worlds we classify as primitive, without their rank or technology, to observe the nature of the creatures there." She gestured to the children. "They were only supposed to watch. We wanted to see if any species in this sector had evolved beyond basic survival instincts." In 93 other worlds, the result was always the same. The lost and hungry are ignored, used, or attacked. Her galaxy-filled eyes focused entirely on him. "But not here, not you. You didn't see pests to be ignored. You didn't see a threat. You saw 2 hungry children. You asked nothing, expected no reward. You just gave." In a galaxy where kindness is rare and compassion is a transaction, what you did is a galactic anomaly. It's profoundly important. John could only stare, his mind a total mess of confusion, terror, and wonder. The Empress raised a slender 3-fingered hand. The massive ship above them responded. "Your act has brought great honor to you and your people," the Empress declared. "And an act like that cannot go unrewarded. It has to be recognized. It has to be amplified, so the entire galaxy knows what a simple person from a primitive world has done." John was even more confused. I don't understand," he stammered out loud. "It was just a sandwich." "To you it was a sandwich," the Empress corrected gently. "To the Dominion it was proof that hope isn't dead. We don't give trinkets or money as rewards. We give status. We give responsibility. We give purpose." She gestured, and a shimmering console appeared in the air in front of John. On it was a complex symbol, pulsing with light. "This is the command fleet of the Outer Rim, a peacekeeping force of 312 capital ships, crewed by 1 million souls. They are loyal. They are ready." The Empress looked at him, and for a second it almost looked like she was smiling. Place your hand on the sigil, John of Earth. Their loyalty, their purpose, is now yours. This is your reward. May you command them with the same quiet compassion you showed my children." John stared at his own trembling hand, then at the glowing console. He looked at the two children, who gave him the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. He thought of his gray apartment, his empty life, the crushing weight of being invisible. And then he reached out and placed his hand on the sigil. A wave of energy, of information, of presence washed over him. He could feel the fleet. He could feel every single ship, every crew member, all of their loyalty surging into him. It was terrifying and incredible. He wasn't John, the data clerk, anymore. He was John, commander of the Starfleet. John never went back to his gray apartment. His life of quiet loneliness was shattered and replaced by a universe of endless possibilities. He walked onto the Empress's ship not as a scared human, but as a man who finally had a purpose. He spent years learning from the Dominion, not as a student, but as an honored equal. He learned to command the fleet that was his, exploring forgotten corners of space and mediating conflicts on distant worlds. He was no longer invisible. He became a legend, a story whispered across 1,000 star systems. The story of the humble man from a forgotten blue world who was given a fleet, not for an act of war, but for an act of kindness. And so a simple gesture for two hungry children didn't just change one man's life. It sent a ripple of hope across the entire galaxy, proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't a weapon. It's a shared lunch. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell for more tales from across the cosmos. Let us know in the comments. What would you do if you were suddenly given an entire star fleet?